What's going on, guys? The Comics Kid 2099 here. Welcome to day 196 of the 365-day graphic novel review challenge. Today, I want to talk to you about Hellboy, The Chained Coffin, and Others. This is volume 3 of the Hellboy series of trade paperbacks. If you'll remember, in some of my other videos where I was talking about Hellboy, I was talking about how Mike Mignola, it seemed like he was halfway between wanting to do an arc-based series where everything is connected, and you can tell that he has some big, huge master plan, and not wanting to do that, and just wanting every story to be a standalone story that doesn't really lead into the next story. It seemed like he was halfway between wanting to do both of those things. The first two storylines that I've talked about already, those were all connected in part of some larger arc where Hellboy is part of some prophecy and we don't really know what the prophecy's about, and Rasputin is trying to fulfill that prophecy, and then you're connecting the Baba Yaga into it, and these aliens on a spaceship somewhere, and these 7 evil space gods. There's all this stuff that's connected in the first two storylines. This book right here completely avoids all of that. This is entirely standalone stuff, and I don't actually mind standalone stories. I don't mind if you say, okay, we're doing this long arc, but we want to take a break from that and do a standalone story here. I mentioned Buffy the Vampire Slayer either yesterday or the day before, and how each season of Buffy had an overall arc, but each season also had standalone stories that didn't have anything to do with that arc. So I don't mind if you want to do standalone stories every now and then, but my problem with the Hellboy series was that after a while, it seemed to me that Mignola had just forgotten the arc or had lost interest in it and only wanted to do standalone stories that had nothing to do with the overall arc. I don't think that this was the right time to do an anthology of short stories like this. This is only volume 3 in what ended up being a very long-running series. I think that he should have done a few more storylines that were connected to the overall arc of this prophecy and Hellboy being this chosen one and all that stuff. I think he should have done a few more trade paperbacks worth of comics of that before he said, okay, now we're going to take a little bit of a break. We're going to show you some of the backstory of this world. We're going to show you Hellboy on a few different missions that don't really have anything to do with all this big heavy stuff that we've been talking about so far. I think that if this had been volume 6 or 7, I would have been more okay with this being a standalone volume with a whole bunch of standalone stories. But the stories here are not bad. They are all very well drawn. Mike Mignola is, as always, a killer artist. The atmosphere is gorgeous. His technique is gorgeous. The writing here is very good. I've been talking about in the last couple volumes that Mignola was kind of struggling as a writer. In the first volume, he needed John Byrne's help to kind of script the story that he had come up with, and then in volume 2, he was doing the story by himself, and he even mentioned in the afterword that he was struggling with that a little bit, and that he kind of changed the story halfway through because it kind of evolved on him, and he didn't really know if he wanted to keep doing the story as he had originally plotted it. These stories here are very well told. They're all short stories. None of them are very long at all. I would say the longest one is maybe 1/4 of the size of this entire book. So none of these stories are especially long, and maybe that's Mignola's strength. Maybe doing short stories is where his strength as a writer lies. I don't know. I'd have to go back and reread some of these other volumes with short stories in them to really determine that. But I really like the writing here. I like the idea behind these stories where up until now, we basically only had Nazis and these made-up space devils that Mignola introduced into the series, and those aliens who kind of looked like Abe Sapien, and then you had a little bit of Romanian mythology with the Baba Yaga. This is starting to introduce the idea that this is a world where all mythology coexists. It's kind of like the X-Files, but a little bit better, where you've got Italian mythology, you've got Irish mythology, Romanian mythology, you've got all kinds of stuff. In one of the earlier volumes, Horus, the god of the dead from Egyptian mythology, he showed up in one story. I like the idea that anything from any mythology can come into any story at any point. I like that idea a lot. It opens a lot of doors for Mignola and allows him to tell as many stories as he could ever possibly want to tell, as long as he can do it in his own little Mignolian way with Hellboy at the center of these stories. I really like that idea a lot. So overall, I would say this story is not bad. This book is not a bad book. It's got some really good, really clever stories in it. My only complaint is that I feel like this was too soon after he had just started his series 2 volumes earlier. And also, I feel like this is a little bit of a harbinger of some of the other, I guess, loss of arc stories that he indulged in later on. But overall, I like this story quite a bit. I like this book a lot. I do recommend it if you are interested in reading Hellboy comics. If anything, I would say you could read this before you read volumes 1 and 2, and you really wouldn't be lost at all, I don't think. That's how disconnected it is from the overall arc of the series. But that's about all that I have to say. I hope that you guys like this review, and if you did, be sure to like, share, comment, and subscribe, and I will be back tomorrow with a different video. In the meantime, you guys have a great rest of the day. Catch you later.